这是一个房龄15年的小区，
This one is a 15-year-old residential complex, and that
而
one
这
is
个
a
小区的房龄
20-year-old
已经超过
complex.
35
This
年了。
complex is over
35年前，
35 years
这个
old.
电梯高层，
35 years ago,
你可以
living in
想
a
象一下
high-rise
它
with an
的
elevator was a
现在
status
呢，
symbol.
绿化
Now,
越
the
弄越
green space is practically zero. The
外墙
exterior
开裂
walls are
是
cracked
是
and leaking. There were
2
two
部电梯，现
elevators.
在就剩
Now,
一个
only one remains, which is completely out
这
of
个也是
service.
挺用
The
这
shared
红毯
area
很
fee
大
is
体
painfully high.
家人们，
Fans, has your neighborhood encountered such a distressing situation? A neighborhood built in 2008, only 15 years old, is already having its elevators replaced en masse, with each household having to share over $3,000. A large area of the exterior wall insulation layer of a landmark luxury residence built in 2010 peeled off, with repair costs reaching $3 per square meter. The residents' WeChat group exploded. Some were calculating the costs, some were complaining, and some couldn't help but ask, can this building really last until the 70-year property rights expire? Don't think this is an isolated case. Similar maintenance problems are now playing out in high-rise residential communities across the country. This isn't an accidental problem, but a structural risk inherent in high-rise buildings, and a hidden danger that every middle-class family in the city must be wary of in their asset allocation over the next decade.
这里的业主怕是做梦。
The owners here never imagined that the homes they bought with high-priced loans would become a real-life high-rise slum. This is Fanggang Garden community on the border of Dongguang and Shenzhen. Built in 1993 with a promised 70-year property rights, however, only 30 years later, the exterior walls are peeling everywhere. So dilapidated, the community environment is speechless. What was once a source of pride for this garden community has now become an African version of a high-rise slum. Seeing this scene is truly sad. I wonder what these residential communities, often over 30 stories high, will look like in a few decades. Chinese people are gradually realizing that those 20 to 30-story high-rise apartment buildings with elevators, once considered high-end housing, may be quietly heading towards a different fate. One reason is that the high costs due to the time. After living in an apartment building for over a decade, the elevators and electrical equipment began to age, leading to a decline in the living experience. We need to understand a core logic. The lifespan of a building is never about how long the reinforced concrete can withstand. What truly determines the living experience are the elevators, plumbing, electrical circuits, and fire protection systems. Economically speaking, these devices have a very clear lifespan of 15 to 20 years. China's high-rise residential boom began after 2000, meaning that by 2030 we will face a collective aging period for high-rise buildings. We'll find elevators frequently breaking down, leaking water, and exterior wall tiles falling like rain. Some might say if the building is broken, just repair it, but it's not that simple. Most residential communities' maintenance funds suffer from insufficient funds from the outset. Faced with maintenance projects often costing millions or even tens of millions of yuan, the amount is often less than half. The property management company ran away, and the maintenance fund is already depleted. In China, the elevators in 33-story buildings have been out of service for 4 months. Residents are climbing the stairs every day. This isn't a residence, it's a base of the challenge to vertical mobility limits. The only remaining option is to raise funds from residents again. However, the fundraising process often leads to conflict. Who should pay more for long-term residences? Should residents on lower floors share the costs equally with those on higher floors? Should owners of vacant or rented apartments contribute? These questions are endlessly discussed, usually inconclusively, resulting in only partial repairs and leaving more safety hazards. Here comes the even more surreal part. Can't we just demolish and rebuild? That's a good question. Developers calculate that if they demolish a 33-story building, they'd have to build a 66-story one to break even. With height restrictions in place, who wants to be that fool? So forget the dream of making money from demolishing high-rise residential buildings. What you're buying might not be an asset, but rather a future real estate that can't be moved or sold. A 30-story high-rise has at least 700 to 800 households. If each household receives around $140,000 in compensation, the compensation cost alone would be over $100 million. Add to that the reconstruction costs, and developers have no profit margin. This means that the ultimate fate of most old high-rise building is unfinished, unsellable, and undemolished. With daily wear and tear, these buildings slowly lose their residential value. More importantly, even those within the construction industry are quietly avoiding risks. In recent years, many large construction groups have reduced or avoided pure residential projects with more than 30 floors. Risk assessment reports have long noted that the operational and maintenance risks of super high-rise residential buildings are extremely high throughout their entire life cycle, and almost no one is willing to take on the mess left behind. When developers and construction companies are avoiding such projects, ordinary homebuyers who are still attracted by the so-called good views and grandeur of the high floors need to be extra cautious. In reality, don't expect anyone to cover these risks. Many people fantasize that the government will bail them out and that insurance will cover losses. But in reality, urban renewal resources are prioritized for older housing with complex ownership and historical issues. New residential communities are generally not covered, and property insurance mostly excludes damage caused by the natural aging of buildings. Ultimately, the maintenance costs fall on the homeowners themselves. Furthermore, more and more people are choosing not to live in high-rise buildings due to practical considerations of safety and convenience. In a fire or earthquake in a 20 to 30-story building, if the elevators stop working, residents can only evacuate by staircase. The higher the floor, the longer the escape time and the greater the difficulty of external rescue. In contrast, residents of lower-rise buildings can more easily and quickly reach safe areas on the ground. In the past, people envied the good view from high-rises, but now they are beginning to reevaluate the great risks of high-rises. Another issue is the hidden cost of shared areas. The shared area in a multi-story residential buildings is typically 10 to 15%, while in high-rise elevator buildings it often reaches 25 to 30%. Buying a condo labeled as 100 square meters might yield only a usable area of around 70 square meters. In other words, with the same budget, the actual usable space is smaller. More importantly, property management fees and heating fees are often calculated based on the building area, meaning homeowners continue to pay for space they can't see and don't use, leading to significant psychological dissatisfaction. One blogger stated that high-rise residential buildings today may gradually evolve into sky slums in 20 years, and this is not an exaggeration. The reasons are very real. On the one hand, the population density is too high. For example, some popular neighborhoods are crammed with 600,000 people, and residents can only enjoy an average of 3 hours of sunlight per day. Elevators are even more crowded than subways during the rush hour, and public facilities are severely overloaded, leading to rapid deterioration. A recent elevator accident in Yunnan province is no accident. It's the inevitable result of long-term inadequate management and maintenance. On July 10, 2025, a serious elevator accident occurred in Kunming, resulting in the tragic death of a 59-year-old resident. The elevator car rapidly ascended from the 17th floor to the 33rd floor in just 55 seconds. The resident repeatedly tried to press the floor selection buttons to escape, but to no avail. The elevator involved was manufactured by Audis, and its last maintenance record showed it was on the day of the accident. On the one hand, if a large number of units are converted to rentals, the fees collected by the property management company will be difficult to sustain. Community public resources are more easily damaged. The phenomenon of using stairwells, garbage dumps, and green belts as temporary public toilets is already common in some Shanghai communities less than 20 years old, indicating that the decline of high-rise residential buildings is almost inevitable if long-term planning and management are lacking. Recently, a blogger visited an old high-rise residential complex and documented her observations. Walking along, I look up and suddenly see water gushing from upstairs. Don't know what is going on. Electric bikes are parked haphazardly and there isn't a single place to charge them. The entrances to each unit are filled with electric bikes, and the stairwell walls are all dilapidated. The fire escape is covered in clothes drying on clotheslines, and there are advertisements everywhere. There are also bikes in the corridors. The blogger also points out that as soon as she reached the elevator, she could smell a pungent and unpleasant odor. She specifically photographed the property management notice, which clearly stated, "No urination or defecation in public," yet the environment around the elevator remains terrible. Upon entering the elevator, the most noticeable thing was the unpleasant smell of smoke, and the elevator shook significantly during operation, making her feel extremely frightened in the confined space. She also mentioned that her colleague had been trapped in this elevator before and experienced a very unsettling situation. The blogger states that Sunshine Garden has been gradually handed over to residents since 2015, nearly 10 years ago. The community's public notice shows that elevator replacement work began as early as 2024. The fact that a community less than 10 years old is already using special funds for large-scale elevator replacements raises the question. Why are more and more people saying that future high-rise residential buildings may gradually evolve into slums? Some industry insiders suggest that high-rise elevator apartments that have been lived in for 10 years should be sold as soon as possible. These kinds of condos are already very difficult to sell on the market, and they can't even compete with walk-up condos of the same age, and there will be more and more of these types of communities in the future.
电梯3天2头就坏。
High-rise buildings over 20 years old have become a hot potato in the resale market and foreclosed properties. It's not that selling them cheaply will attract buyers, those in the know simply don't dare to take them on. Banks have also tightened their policies with increasingly stringent appraisals and shortened loan terms. Some banks have even directly rejected loans. You can't even qualify to take them on. In some cases, in the same area, high-rise buildings over 15 years old are actually cheaper than old, dilapidated buildings over 20 years old. You might ask, why is this? The reason is actually quite practical. Low-rise residential buildings have smaller common areas, higher usable floor areas, and often in better locations, while high-rise residential buildings have larger common areas and elevators, and public facilities are long-term liabilities, with future maintenance a bottomless pit. People would rather live in an old, dilapidated building than bear the prospect of a future they can't afford to repair. Furthermore, it's important to understand that for properties already depreciating in value, the ongoing maintenance costs inevitably cause hesitation. Residents with slightly better financial means choose to move out, leaving behind those who often cannot afford the ongoing maintenance costs. Insufficient maintenance funds and lagging equipment upkeep lead to a gradual decline in building quality, further depreciating property values. On the other hand, the mortgage system also reflects the potential risks in the real estate market. In China, banks generally set a 30-year mortgage term, which is not arbitrary, but rather takes into account the actual lifespan of the buildings. Do you think your home will still be yours in 70 years? Wake up. The average lifespan of a building in China is only 25 years. Shenzhen's first-generation commercial housing became dilapidated after 35 years, with the steel reinforcement rotting into dust. The renovation cost is higher than the down payment. Why involve a 30-year mortgage term? Because banks already know your condo won't last 30 years. A down payment of $70,000 plus a loan of $220,000 is equivalent to wasting 20 years of your youth, not daring to have children, and not daring to quit your job. If you lose your job, your home will be auctioned off and you'll lose it. You've worked for the bank for free for 10 years. Why is this? Because the world needs laborers. Let's look at the overall housing market environment. Since 2022, the Chinese housing market has been like a train that suddenly lost its throttle, slowing down and becoming increasingly directionless. Second and third-tier cities led the decline, followed by first-tier cities. The national average housing price has fallen by more than 30%, and liquidity is drying up. Official data shows that in January 2026, the prices of new and second-hand homes in 70 large and medium-sized cities continued to decline. New home sales in first-tier cities fell 0.3% month-on-month, while existing home sales fell 0.5%. Year-on-year declines in existing home sales in Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen range from 6.8 to 8.7%, with cities like Wuhan and Chengdu seeing over 200,000 listings. The transaction cycle has lengthened to over 18 months, and it's become common for properties to remain unsold for 6 months. Prices are falling, and houses are becoming increasingly difficult to sell. Pan Shi, co-founder of Soho China, stated that buying a home is not about getting rich quickly, but about securing a livelihood. The era of blindly buying properties and making money is over. Now, house prices fluctuate, with existing home sales in Baicheng falling for over 40 consecutive months, and 60 to 70% of cities nationwide experiencing month-to-month declines. Houses are shifting from investment goods back to consumer goods. Buying a home is for children's education and a stable home for the family, not for doubling profits next year. The rent-to-price ratio has risen to 1.8 to 2%, indicating increasing rationality. Speculative buying is no longer effective, and comfortable living and easy rental are the key priorities. Furthermore, several years ago, entrepreneur Cao DeWang stated, "Houses are just piles of cement and bricks that will become increasingly worthless in the future." This statement was once considered extreme, but given current market trends, you'll find it has a lot of realism. The real estate blogger All the Way North, with millions of followers, also consistently warned that housing prices might continue to decline. The number of second-hand homes listed for sale would increase, and ordinary families should reduce their real estate holdings and keep more cash. As a result, this account was permanently banned this Lunar New Year, sparking widespread attention, not only because an account disappeared, but also because it touched upon market sentiment. Some netizens in Liaoning province have reported a significant decrease in online content about falling housing prices and sluggish business in recent months. Videos can't be uploaded or they're quickly throttled. In the real estate sector, which is highly correlated with family assets, diverse perspectives are crucial for homebuyers to assess risk. If pessimistic voices are excluded, ordinary families may not have a comprehensive understanding of market information, which is clearly unfair to decision-making. Industry insiders say that China's real estate market in 2026 will no longer be a financing game but a debt repayment game. Cinda Real Estate have $7.7 billion in interest-bearing debt, a debt-to-asset ratio of 70.83%, and a net loss of $1 billion. This is just the tip of the iceberg. In the past, land acquisition relied on loans, construction relied on pre-sales, and old debts were used to pay off new ones. Now, banks are closed, financing is frozen, and cash flow is disrupted. Previously, the competition was about who could break 100 billion yuan in sales. Now it's about who can survive until tomorrow. But don't misunderstand, this isn't the end of the liquidation process, but rather the middle stage of the industry's deleveraging. State-owned enterprises are being forced to reduce their debt to the 50% red line, leaving small and medium-sized real estate companies with no choice but to exit the market passively. Furthermore, the sale of completed homes is spreading nationwide. In Hainan, the proportion of completed homes has reached 70%, and nationwide it's close to 1/3. Sounds like good news. Wrong. For real estate companies, this is a lifeline. Pre-sales used to be a vital source of cash flow, but now that's been pulled. Without pre-sale cash flow, many companies simply can't survive until the day of delivery. What you see is a return of security, what the market sees as cash flow suffocation. This means that more projects may be halted in the next 2 years. Many Chinese people think that after such a long period of decline, it must have bottomed out. But a true bottom has a characteristic: the panic selling is complete. What about now? A large amount of debt has not yet been restructured, local government finances are deeply tied to land sales, and inventory remains high. This is not the end, but the second half. The true bottom may have to wait until leverage is completely digested, inventory is cleared, and confidence is completely shattered. That day has not yet arrived. That's all for today. If you enjoy our content, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment, or share it with a friend. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.